Oh, Beats, if there was ever a name in audio with more controversy, it'd probably be Bose. But given that these have a new tuning profile and some new features, well, I think we should give the Studio Pro a fair shot. Let's talk about it. I'm DMS, you're watching the Headphone Show, and let's dig into these consumer wireless headphones. Now, these are not hi-fi. They're not going into the same ranges as your Focal Clears, your Headphones, Odysseys, or anything like that. They're the cheap things you find at Best Buys, Walmarts, and more made for the people who aren't really into high-end audio. But that doesn't mean they can't be good. Things like the Nothing Ear 2 I feel like were pretty fantastic. In fact, AirPods Pros made by Apple, the company that owns Beats, are really, really solid. I can't say the same for the AirPods Max. The Beats, well, they definitely don't feel great in the hand. They're very creaky. These pads are extremely shallow, so you're pretty much guaranteed to have your ear sitting right on the driver. There is basically no padding on top aside from a little bit of rubber, and they sound like they're breaking every time you close them. There is a decent bit of mobility in this adjustment mechanism and swivel, but it really doesn't help much with the comfort. On the bottom we have a 3.5mm analog input, as well as a Type-C that can be used for charging them, but also for using them over a USB-C DAC mode. In that USB-C DAC mode, you get multiple sound profiles. You can toggle here for just their regular tuning, a vocal emphasized tuning that reduces the bass and is for like conference calls, and another tuning that they say is for movies and entertainment. This just makes everything kind of worse, but we'll talk about that later. There's also a button right here on the B, as well as volume controls above and below. Comfort is a screaming nightmare. The Beats are not comfortable at all, and that's where I want to draw a comparison to these. These are the Bose QC45, but realistically they're in the same chassis as things like the Bose QC35. This is a headband style and cup style that has been known for a pretty long time in the audio industry. There is padding on top, ear pads that are deep enough for a human ear to fit inside of them without touching the driver the whole time, and a pretty significant range of mobility. These two headphones are not in the same league as far as comfort is concerned. The Beats aim for a comfort profile of a dollar store kids headphone, whereas the Bose, well, they're meant to be worn on an airplane generally for hours at a time. Which is why a lot of times when I travel on very long flights, I'll bring the Bose, if not just for their noise canceling and comfort. We'll come back to these later. The Beats do come with a carrying case and two cables, that 3.5mm and Type-C cable as mentioned, though the Type-C cable is a bit short. If you plug this into the headphone, which is on the right side, and then plug it into a laptop where most USB-Cs are on the left side, you end up with this very short cable that runs right across your mouse and keyboard. Not much you can do about that, unfortunately. When I was in high school, there was a lot of knockoff Beats out there on the market, and the funny thing is you couldn't tell which were the knockoff Beats and which were the real ones because they were both built just as poorly. That really hasn't changed. But these have a new tuning profile. It's supposed to be a lot better, so let's talk about sound, subjective first, and then we'll go into frequency response after that. So here's the deal. These have head tracking and spatial audio now, just like things like AirPods. The problem is that doesn't matter when the rest of the headphone's acoustic performance is subpar, and I really don't see a reason why you would purchase these over a set of AirPods. Specifically the current generation AirPods Pros, and as much as I dislike AirPods Max, well, I'd probably take the Max over these if not just for comfort. I mean, the AirPods Max really struggle with frequencies between 1.5 kHz and 8 to 9 kHz. That whole range is just recessed and scooped out. And while the Beats do produce that range to a much better level than the AirPods Max, what's the point if you can't wear them for very long? But while they might win in that area of the sound, the rest of it is kind of a mess. There are spikes in the upper treble, it sounds very peaky, very sibilant. The bass is both muddy and bloated and hollow at the same time. It sounds like there's recesses in certain parts of the bass, but also big, boomy, bloated bumps in other parts. The mid-range, well, it does exist, but it's overshadowed by the treble peaks and the bass. It's kind of like if you tried to do the Harman tuning but did a really bad job of it. And I can say this is more attention to detail than Beats has put into their tuning in the past, but it still has a long way to go before it is not just good, but acceptable. Detail is actually surprisingly not bad. They do sound more detail capable than other wireless headphones I've heard in similar price ranges, things like the Bose QC45s, the Sony 1000s, or even the AirPods Max, but again, is that detail put to use if they're extremely uncomfortable and not tuned well enough to be enjoyable. They do get very uncomfortably loud with very little effort, but I couldn't really listen to these very loud. In fact, I struggled with them at low volumes because of how peaky and sibilant the treble is. It is a very harsh listening environment. And that seems to kind of go across the board. It's a harsh listening environment for the actual sound and for the comfort. No surprise, soundstage and imaging are both good, especially when utilizing things like Dolby Atmos or spatial audio. And the active noise canceling is surprisingly decent too. Even high frequencies that a lot of things struggle with cut out pretty easily. And the transparency mode is not bad, but also not as excellent as you would get on things like AirPods. I would say that it's comparable in transparency mode to the Bose QC45. Decent, but not excellent. But with all of that said, let's jump into frequency response and objective sound. Okay, buckle up, I've got a bunch of graphs here for you. First off, I've got a raw graph for you. The red line is the new Beats Studio Pro. The green line is our target, which is diffuse field with a 10 decibel downward slope. Headphones don't have to exactly match this line to be good, but it's just a generally good guide. Another thing to note is that this measurement shows a bit of a different result in the low frequency, specifically around 150 Hertz, than a few other rigs. That's because closed back headphones tend to vary a lot in the bass from headphone rig to headphone rig, just like they will on your human head. But that variation aside, we do see considerable boosts in the very low frequencies, and if we completely assume that that dip isn't there, which it sounds like it is there when running a frequency sweep, at least on my head, then the rest of the mid-range is actually pretty decent, especially running up to about 3 kilohertz. Then we see a bit of a recess down, and then here's where the problem is. Now, around 9 kilohertz, you do get canal resonance on the Brüel & Kjær 4128, the rig this is measured on, but at 8 kilohertz, that's not canal resonance, that's just a peak in the headphone's frequency response, and you can see that extends up above 9 kilohertz too. So the treble on this thing is really elevated in these regions. Honestly, if this headphone had just slightly lower upper treble and slightly lower bass, well, then it would be a pretty decent sounding, really uncomfortably and poorly built headphone. But those two facets take an overall pretty decent frequency response and make it sound really unpleasant. Let's compare this to the Bose QC45. The Bose QC45 also has a lot of bass, and it's more through the mid-range as well. Definitely a headphone that is boomy. Again, we see ear gain up to 3 kilohertz, a bit more emphasized on the Bose, specifically around like 2.5 to 2.7K. Then the rest of the treble up till 10K is pretty solid, then the Bose have a large peak. Both of these headphones are basically guilty of the same sonic sins in different ways. But the Bose I can actually wear because of their comfort, and their app allows me to EQ out the bass and the treble a bit, which is why I can and do take the Bose on airplanes. But what is the point of a noise-canceling portable headphone that didn't pay attention to ergonomics? I could rant about that the whole time. For one more point of comparison, I'm going to show you these graphs compensated as well. This is both of them compensated to diffuse field, and the green line here is a 10 decibel slope. Between the two, I still find the Bose a little bit more pleasant, especially given the fact that with their app, I can EQ it, but neither are particularly sonically great. I bought these out of my own pocket with the hopes that Beats had made something considerably better, and they definitely had the opportunity to and started to move in that direction, but couldn't break away from the fatal flaws that the brand is known for. There is no facet in which I can comfortably recommend the Beats Studio Pro, and I also do not think there's any facet in which they deserve the Pro branding. And that is going to conclude this video, guys. If you liked it, please leave a like down below. Comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can at the forums or Discord, both available at the link in the video description. As always, don't forget to stick around, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Till next one, guys. Peace.